Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of BiblioTech on Air. I'm Rosanna.
And I'm Ruby.
And today we have a very special guest with us that we will be interviewing, David Marquez, the Executive Director of Economic and Community Development. Thank
Hello.
you for being on here, David. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do as Executive Director?
Well, what I do as an Executive Director is I oversee an amazing team of people. I have a department of 93. They're all very committed to the people of Bexar County. We serve our residents and our businesses here with a variety of services. It's been a great career. I've been at the county 26 years. I've been doing this department for about 5, the combined department. And it's really a lot of fun. But folks come to us when they need help with certain things, either social services or when companies come to us and they're looking for assistance so they can move a company here or expand.
It's cool.
It's really good, yeah.
So how do you work with local businesses, community organizations, and government entities to support the economic growth in the area?
So we're part of a team. You know, it's like a lot of things in San Antonio, like our beloved Spurs. Everything's done better with the team effort. So we partner quite a bit with the city of San Antonio, and the two of us are both also kind of the lead organizations behind a nonprofit called Greater SATX. Mm-hmm. So we look at them as the tip of the spear. So when companies are thinking of expanding somewhere else in the U.S., or we have a lot of global companies now that are looking to come back to the United States or come to the United States for production, then we typically those leads will go in through Greater SATX, and then they'll come to us and explain what the project is, and we'll work on whatever potential incentives or other programs we might be able to offer them. And those go back to the company, and we're competing against other communities trying to win those jobs here into our community for our residents.
It's funny you mentioned the Spurs because a lot of the talk with us getting Wemby now
Right.
from the NBA draft, that's supposed to bring a lot of economic growth and definitely a lot more interest in the community. So sounds like this is going to be right up your alley.
Yeah, and you know, we began doing economic development in 2005, so that was prime time for the Spurs, right? Mm-hmm. And in that day, we were recruiting quite a bit from Asia, both in Japan and China. And, you know, you would go to someplace like Japan or Tokyo or to Shanghai, and you'd say, well, we're from, Bexar County. Well, where's that?
Yeah.
Well, we're from San Antonio. Oh, the Spurs, especially China.
Cool.
Yeah, because in that day, that's when Yao Ming was a player for the Rockets. So they would watch the NBA games and see the Spurs against the Rockets or whatever. And those are years when we won championships. So they were following. So those kinds of things give us sort of free equity and branding around the world in a very positive way. We take, when we're taking protocol gifts, which is a thing in Asia, Spurs caps and those kinds of things. And then we go back a couple of years later to make another visit with the delegates or the company, and they'd have their Spurs cap on.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
It's a great collaboration and really very valuable for us to have the amazing San Antonio Spurs.
So good things really do come out of the I-10 rivalry.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially when we win.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone loves when we win.
Time to go honking.
Go. That's amazing. So you personally, you've gone and done these trips?
Oh, yeah. We, right off the bat, when Toyota arrived, Judge Wolf and the Commissioner's Court gave me the task of, this is a huge win, and we need to leverage it for the maximum benefit. So as many jobs as we can get out of this win, because we made a huge investment as a community, hundreds of millions of dollars to give them the land and grants for the roads and the infrastructure and all of these things that we did collectively between the city, the county, and the state. So now we've got to milk it for all it's worth. So, yeah, we've been working in Japan really ever since then. We actually have a Texas-Japan office that our community funds in Tokyo. And in fact, he emailed me yesterday. There's a delegation of, I think, 30 small to medium-sized Japanese companies that, again, are looking to expand in the U.S. They look at Texas as a wonderful area, fast-growing, big population, good market. And then he points them to San Antonio or Dallas. He serves a larger community now. Originally, he was just exclusive to San Antonio, but he's broadened out. And so we'll host those companies here and tell them how wonderful it is in San Antonio and try to get them to consider investing here.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's so awesome.
So I've been able to go over there as well. So we've had a number of trade. The last time I was there was in November, although before that it had been 10 years since I had gone. But I went on a delegation with Mayor Nuremberg and some other leaders from our community.
Wow.
Pretty cool collective effort. I like that's so cool though, man.
Yeah, there's only one way to win economic development. That's collectively. And so if you think about Bexar County, we are a big 2 million population community, and San Antonio 1.5 million, but around us are still relatively small counties, 40, 50,000 people in Atascosa County. So, but we've always encouraged the greater SATX to think regionally. And in fact, we look at our region as including the Valley and including the border and including Dallas and Houston and Corpus Christi and even into northern Mexico. That's been our strategy from the beginning, because what I've learned as we go to these countries, you can't sell them on Bexar County. You can't sell them on San Antonio. You have to sell them on the market and the region. And in our area, that means northeastern Mexico and Texas. So that's the region we sell.
That's understandable. You don't want to make it sound so limited.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't know any more than if I were to ask you, well, what's the, name 10 cities in China? And people would say, oh, it's easy. Let's see, there's Shanghai and Beijing and, Xi'an maybe. You start to stumble. So the notion that when we're traveling internationally, whether it's in Europe or Asia, that they know San Antonio because we have the Spurs is a little bit, probably not quite valid. It does give us that inroad, as I mentioned earlier, but they still need context. So a big part of what we're doing in those early stages is just providing the context of Texas, the context of Bexar County, the context of the Central Texas, our collaborations with Austin and what's possible here. And then when they come, we just keep deepening those relationships, trying to get them to understand how they can be successful here. That's our goal in economic development.
I'm really intrigued by that. Like the Spurs just being a really good in. Like that's not the only one, but that's
well, Texas
so connecting.
Yeah, Texas has such a mystique anyway around the world, of course. So just the Texas part initially before the Spurs, or if you're not from San Antonio, you're selling Texas and the Texas cowboy, oil fields. During those early days of the Eagle Ford shale boom, the Japanese were fascinated by it. They just thought, man, we see all these oil rigs and they're just flaring off the natural gas, which in Japan would be like throwing gold away, right? They wanted to come, they wanted to go see the shale play, and they wanted to see all of this activity, and so they were bringing delegations over, and so Texas has always had a good brand for economic development around the world. And when you think about the totality of Texas, it's pretty diverse. It's everything from aerospace to software to defense and oil and gas, of course, agriculture, everything, and we're growing. We're a rapidly growing, relatively young population. That's not true in other parts of the world. Japan has a really serious problem where their population is getting older and older. There's not enough young people to backfill the older people when they retire. And that's true in other parts of the U.S. as well. States like Mississippi that we sometimes compete with they're tiny. They're 4.6 million people. And again, getting older, most people, younger people don't see themselves staying or moving to Mississippi unless there's a real opportunity. So we've got a great story, but it doesn't get out if we don't tell it.
Yeah.
So that's what we do in economic development, is tell that great story.
That's such amazing work. So you said before we started recording that you're born and raised San Antonio.
Born and raised.
So is this position something that you've always been intrigued about and wanted to do your whole life, or when did you start getting interested in it?
It's been I give God all the glory. How I wound up here is really a longer story than we probably need a whole podcast for that. But I started working at Kelly Air Force Base after I finished high school. I was a machinist and was working a few odd jobs and going to SAC and taking a few hours. I really didn't have any direction of what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. But my mom and my dad and my brother all worked at Kelly. So my mom's like, hey, they're starting this program for Department of Labor apprenticeships. You should try it. Okay, so I tried it. I got in, and I was trained as a machinist. I did that. I worked in the machine shop for about 7 years, and then I realized that I wanted something different. So I started applying and getting involved with other projects around quality assurance and quality improvement, which really helped me out when I got over here. But at some point I realized I had to finish my degree. So they had a program at Kelly to finish your degree program. I got mine at Southwest Texas State, now Texas State University. And once I was going to school, and even though I had a family and everything, I was already set up for that. So I got my master's degree right after that at Trinity. And while I was at Trinity, I met who was then the county's budget officer, a guy named Marquez, who gave me a shot, and I've been here ever since. So,
wow.
Yeah, and so I've just had a range of jobs. It's been a fantastic career. I recommend the county to anybody who wants to come in and have an interesting job that's fulfilling, helps people, and serves our community.
Oh yeah, definitely. Another thing that we were talking about before we got started on the interview was how you're the fourth person we've interviewed from economic and community development so far, and how everyone there is just so passionate about what they do and so excited to talk about, they love their jobs. And I feel like we relate in that way, BiblioTech and economic and community development. It's just nice seeing the similarities and personalities, and excitement about what you do as your job.
Right. Well, you're part of that. So I worked very closely with Judge Wolf throughout his career until he retired, and was involved when he was thinking about the notion of BiblioTech. And so in my world, we see BiblioTech as a part of the upstream workforce development side of the house. I remember I gave a speech one time, remarks, to a group of people in an organization called Masters Leadership Program. And the presentation that I put together explained, in my view, how things like the Riverwalk or the Spurs or the universities or the Southwest School of Art back then are involved, the mission reach. Like, how does that affect economic development? So you're both on the side of helping someone who's not from here to see the quality of life for themselves, for their families, for their employees. They always want to know, where my employee's going to live, because I can't locate somewhere that's not convenient for them. I have to be near them, but if near them doesn't work because there's no neighbor. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. So what is the BiblioTech factor? It helps to explain that we are concerned and working on helping our population to get better educated and more prepared for the future economy around the technology things that y'all do. So you're contributing in your own way. You may not see it, but in the ecosystem of K through 12 and P through 16 and adult learning and lifelong learning and people doing, just learning more skills, then you're in that ecosystem and you're contributing.
Thinking about a lot of our resources like Interplay and Udemy that definitely help people out.
Lynda.com. I mean, all of that stuff is important. And we point people to what you do here. Yeah, it's very easy to do because it's an easy sell. And it's so unique. So anything that sets you apart, that they'll remember you versus Oklahoma City or Phoenix or somewhere, is a positive. So anything our job is to kind of gauge the situation and what message will resonate with those people that we're trying to recruit. All of that's on the economic development side. There's a whole other part of my department, but on the economic development side, that's where this stuff lives. And why I think it was wise when the court combined the two departments, because this part of the house, the social serving side of the house, the resident constituent facing side of the house, we can do the best there when we can connect those folks to these opportunities that we're bringing here, because there's no better social service program than having a great job. That's the social program. That's where you're going to get your insurance, your retirement. You're going to pay for, help get out of debt and those kinds of things. Pay your student loans. You need a great job, and so that's the best we can do. We try to want to craft a system that maximizes the number of people from this side of the house that benefit from this side of the house. That's our objective.
It's like incentivizing people, not just at the state level, business level, but also at the local level.
Yeah, we're a relatively small department compared to our colleagues at the city. I think they probably got 50 or 60 people just in economic development. They have a much broader mandate than we do, where we're 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how you count. I'm not counting the workforce team, which is a few more. But we do a lot. We've always punched above our weight. And over the years, we've learned, at first we try to do everything and be everyone to everyone. And so, as we say in my department, if you try to serve everyone, you're not going to serve anyone. So we've limited ourselves down. We're very focused on advanced manufacturing because of Toyota and because of my background as a machinist. We're very focused on specific skills of workforce that we know are careers and will help that target industry. So those two things align. And we know that for many of the population that we serve, those are low barrier careers to get into. So it's not a 4-year, $120,000 of college debt sort of thing.
Yeah.
10 weeks, we're subsidizing it 100%, and we can put you in a career. And if you have a justice involved background, or you didn't finish high school or whatever, as long as you can do a little math and you're willing to work hard, we can put you into these careers right away. And we've been doing that over and over again. Our goal now is to scale it.
And we will be back after these messages.
Calling all local musicians, don't forget about our resource, San Antonio Soundstage, where you can submit your original songs, band photos, album art, song lyrics, music videos, video interviews, and more that will be featured on this awesome resource. We also invite our community to check this out so they can become more familiar with the local music scene in this fun and creative way. Check it out.
And now we're back.
You're sharing all these wonderful things that you guys have been doing in your positions. So I guess that'll bring me to my next question. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face in your role, and how do you address them?
Well, there are always going to be challenges when you're dealing with human systems, right? There's lots of opinions about how things should run, and there's a lot of entrenched programs that have maybe had a good run for a while, but they're out there. They absorb resources, and they don't necessarily produce results, or they're not focused. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. If you want, like at the highest kind of meta level, it's that there's not really a community-wide systematic approach to just problem identification and problem solving. And in the world of politics, you often succeed by being very transactional and very sort of, ready, fire, aim, and doing. And there's certainly times where that's really important. And in the world of politics, it can often be important. But in the world of economic growth and development, a steady and more studied approach, I think, would serve better. But there's not really much of a dialogue in that area to ask, like, how better to align the K through 12 system with the target industries. We talk about it, and there's a lot of effort underway, but that's all happening on top of, or sometimes underneath, the existing system that's just driven towards, college, go to school. If you don't know what you want to do, you'll figure it out. And it's just, that produces the results we have today, and that's really not very, very acceptable. We could do better for people. Those are challenges, and really what that comes down to is the deployment of scarce resources, because there's really only so much money and so much time and so much horsepower to deploy. So we want to be always pushing. In my department, we're trying to push a different narrative and to model better behavior around workforce development, better activity around economic development, better programs around social service delivery. We're trying to prove that there's another better way using logic and data that will help drive better outcomes than what we've been doing. And today, and to be fair to our forebears, right, from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the aughts, they didn't have what we have today, right? They didn't have cheap data and the cloud and mobile devices everywhere and smartphones and AI. And so we now have at our disposal tools that should enable us to do what they perhaps only could have dreamed of, and in terms of evaluating and improving program effectiveness. But we've got to step into that role.
I like that progressiveness. That's, because you see companies that have been around for decades, and they just still have the same system. And maybe it's good for the people who've been there long term, but what about the newbies coming in, the younger folks? It might be hard to adapt sometimes. So it's good that you guys are always thinking ahead or trying to.
Yeah, that's our department, and I'm very proud of the team that we have. I think that's been everything we do is a team effort. I don't have to do anything much except direct, but because I've got such amazing people across the whole department, and it's a lot. The pandemic certainly was another big challenge for us, because a lot of that fell into our department with relatively limited growth and resources. We have had pretty good expansion. but the scale of money that we had to administer grew by 5, 6, 7-fold. So our utility assistance program, as an example, it's typically around $8 or $9 million a year that's available for people to help pay their bill if they're lower socioeconomic category. Will help pay their electric or gas. We got like $50 million to spend in a couple of years. So it's really a lot of money and difficult. And on top of that, this money was also given to the state and to others, the city. So you're all sort of chasing the same problem. Again, with the lack of a systematic view, it probably wasn't the wisest thing to do. I understand why it happened, and it was probably necessary during those early days of the pandemic when we made everybody go home and not work, right? We had to come in and shore them up with rent support and utility support and food and that kind of stuff. But it was just could have probably, and there have been a lot of improvements. Certainly the county has made efforts to be more strategic in deploying those resources.
I mean, to be fair, that really, caught everyone off guard.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate you sharing that with us as well.
Yeah, it was unprecedented. Although, as Judge Wolf used to point out, it's really not the first pandemic we've had. It was just the first one that really took off across the whole country. But we've had SARS, we've had swine flu, we've had avian flu over the years that have struck our communities and been the same sort of novel viral thing. And this one just was, more deadly, perhaps, easier transmitted, less understood. It's something we've got to be mindful of and be better prepared for.
Right.
Yeah.
Could you share some details about the programs and initiatives that you oversee, such as business attraction and retention, tax incentives, utility assistance, and how they benefit the constituents of Bexar County, which, again, you did touch on already as well?
Yeah. So, at a sort of philosophical level, if you will, a city typically is either growing or it's dying. Expansion, unfortunately, brings with it some challenges. We see it every day with the traffic. You see the rooftops growing up in areas that were previously countryside, and you see gentrification. You see people living in older neighborhoods that start to get pressure. So there's definitely negative consequences that are attendant when you have good economic growth. And those have to be taken into account and dealt with so that your existing residents don't necessarily get harmed by what's happening. But again, doing nothing's not an option either, because that means that their homes are going to decline. They don't have the economic means to keep themselves up. So there's not a good solution that would eliminate all of the potential negative consequences. But you have to be mindful that growth has great potential, but it also has the potential to create situations. So when we're trying to help the economy grow, as I mentioned earlier, we depend on the private sector. And in our community, I should say also that we depend heavily on the military and the federal dollars that flow in. So for us in San Antonio, we have the additional industry, if you will, of Uncle Sam and the dollars that are spent here on cybersecurity, on the military, on those kinds of things, the National Security Agency. Those are careers and jobs that we don't necessarily have to compete for, but we have to be making sure that we're considered when they're looking for expansion opportunities. And there are, in fact, some competitions. We've competed for a couple of federal labs that are out there being discussed. And so we, as a community, put our proposals together and say we would love to host it here. So that part of it is another part of the economy. In order to get the private sector ones, though, it typically involves some level of conversation around the resources that we have. And it's a surprisingly small number of economic development projects that actually get a tax abatement or any kind of tax-based incentive. It's probably 10, 15%. Most projects come here because it's the right business thing to do. So if you think about, as I mentioned earlier, Toyota, what that allows us to do is provide the incentives in a concentrated way on the one project. You get the benefit of the supplier park, which they have with 22 or 3 other companies that we provided some limited incentives. By the way, all of those incentives are all gone now. Those tax abatements are all fully run their course. And then you start to see, well, now you can attract other suppliers without incentives because they need to be near Toyota or near Navistar or near Boeing or wherever it may be. So you're trying to reach that tipping point where other factors drive those companies to have to be here beyond you're trying to lure them with incentives or other programmatic ways. And in the area of advanced manufacturing, it kind of feels like that's where we are. We're getting a huge number of companies here, Toyota suppliers, Navistar suppliers, Tesla suppliers, even though Tesla's not in Bexar County. So that's what drives that sort of economic growth. But when we are trying to catalyze it, we are using tax abatement programs that offer them some relief from property taxes for up to 10 years. But just to keep in mind that we're only talking about the Bexar County tax rate, which is, I'm using a very round number, about 29 cents per 100 valuation. It's about 10% or less of your total tax bill. So let's just say you had a tax rate of $2.50. We're talking about just abating a portion of that. And then we don't always give 100%. So relatively speaking, it's not so much the amount of dollars, unless it's a really big Toyota level project, but it's oftentimes more a matter of allowing you to have this dialogue and bringing in a conversation that shows you support them as a company, that you support them as an industry. And it allows you to get back in exchange for that guarantees on wages, guarantees on the number of jobs created, guarantees. So it's a transaction, it's a business negotiation just like anything else. And we are always seeking to do better and to be more effective, both in terms of successfully negotiating them or bringing them in. So, as I said earlier, why do we do all of that?
Yeah.
Because people need jobs. And we in my department differentiate between a job and a career kind of in this way, right? So you hear a lot of talk about, well, we need a $15 an hour minimum wage or whatever, that may be. You can start somebody at $17 an hour, but if 3 years later they're making $17.50, they haven't made much progress. But if I start someone at $15 an hour in a career and 3 years later they're at 25, that's the better choice, right? The better pathway. I think you can see that. So we try to focus on companies who have career pathways for people, the ability for someone to come in at a relatively lower paid entry-level job, but that there's, if they choose to, there's pathways up within the company that they can earn through working hard or through educating themselves or getting educated by the company. That's what we're after. And that the barrier of entry is relatively low. Again, it doesn't necessarily require a college degree. In manufacturing, it is open to people that may have a criminal background or a justice-involved background. So this is, and that fits our community, right? That's just unfortunately who we are. We are a very large, poor city. And our version of economic development has always been built around something that benefits our population. There's a whole other model, the Austin model, is bring bright people to your community, have them bring their education and their ideas to your community, and then glom it on top of the existing Austin economy. And you can see what happens. It's fantastic, but it's also expensive and it's crushingly difficult to be poor in Austin. There's all sorts of factors involved. We have the other approach, which is bring your careers here because we've got some great people here who get put to work. They may need training, they may need education, they may need other services, but once they're in and they're able to get, for the first time perhaps, some economic mobility for themselves, then we're really hitting our stride because the company will be successful. They'll thrive here and they'll provide careers, and these folks that get those careers can now afford to get a mortgage, pay their car, buy a boat, put their kids through college, save something for retirement beyond the job that they may have had before.
That's awesome. That's really great information that you're sharing with us right now. That you never really think about, like you said, comparing Austin and San Antonio, the way that we're approaching the idea.
Well, not everyone sees it that way.
Yeah.
So there's certainly a group of people in San Antonio that are very well intended, but they really do look at the Austin kind of model. And it's not just Austin. There's other communities in the country, and Nashville's the latest sort of poster child for attracting people there. And we have to have some of that also. But by and large, in our community, the strategy has been around building our economic strength for our population. Now, why is that true? So you asked about the other programs that we have. So that model won't work for everyone. What if someone's old, or they've got, kids with disabilities or whatever it may be? So we're just leaving them to the side. No, we have to provide great programs for them as well, and try to help reduce the amount of bureaucracy, if you will, that's necessary to help them get the services that they deserve and that are owed oftentimes. These are federal programs. The Utility Assistance Program is probably the more structured one that I can talk about. We receive, as I said, on a typical year, about $8 to $9 million. In order to qualify for those, you have to be earning at 150% of the federal poverty level or below. So we're talking about people making $25,000 a year with families, with kids. We only serve families with children or senior citizens, right? So these are people that are really, but for these dollars, would be in hurting. We can pay certain months of their utilities up to certain caps per year. And we serve oftentimes the same families over and over because their circumstances haven't changed. So we've got programs like that for those residents for whom that career option, that economic independent mobility is really not realistic for them. But they still are residents and citizens and deserve our best support as well. We try to work, as a result of the COVID money, we got dollars for rent support as well. And so same thing, although the qualification levels are a little higher, you can be earning up to 80% of the more or less the average wage that someone would get. So you might be making $50,000 or $60,000 a year and still qualify for some rent support if you were affected by COVID. There's some other factors involved. Now those programs will go away in a year or two. But those are available because we live in a civilized Bexar County, and we want to make sure that people aren't, in the streets. It's difficult. Homeless issues are always a challenge for us. We do have some level of affordability on our housing, nothing like these other communities that I'm talking about yet, but we want to stay ahead of it. And so my department also has programs that help to increase the supply of affordable housing, both for rent and for market rate, and as well as for a mortgage types of programs. We help a little bit in those areas. We also want to help people who want to stay in their house. So houses are expensive to own, and for someone who's a senior and maybe the roof is getting old and they on a fixed income, so we have dollars that we work with agencies to perhaps help with some level of home repair and remodeling, if you will. So those are the other end of the spectrum. The rest of the population that, like I said, they're just as deserving of our best programs, and I've got amazing people that work in those social kind of constituent-facing programs as well.
And we will be back after these messages.
Did you know BiblioTech has access to the TechShare research databases? And it's all for free with your BiblioTech library card, where you have access to hundreds of additional databases, including those featuring genealogy, academic research, health information, and even Gale legal forms, where you can find a wide selection of state-specific and multi-state legal forms across the most popular legal areas. This includes real estate contracts, wills, premarital agreements, bankruptcy, divorce, landlord-tenant, and many others. Check it out for free today with your library card.
And now we're back.
So you already answered the next question as well by speaking. I just want to reinstate it.
Sure.
That as a resident of San Antonio yourself, what personal connection or motivation drives you to contribute to the economic and community development of Bexar County? And you already mentioned that a little bit about yourself, that you're a San Antonio resident and you want to see our community stay here and grow.
Yeah, but and it's a great question. I grew up in a very middle class family. My parents were that typical idea that the former Kelly Air Force Base was a pathway to the middle class for the Mexican-American families in our community. And that was definitely us. We were never lacking for food, and we took vacations and that kind of thing. And my parents bought a house back in the late 50s. It was back then in the suburbs, So we had a good life, but still, given family and friends of my parents, was certainly around a lot of the other part of our economy in Bexar County, in our community. My dad, his family's all from far southeast Bexar County, and even today there are parts of our county that don't have access to running water.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a kid, my dad had a water truck, and he would buy loads of water from one of the local waterworks, and we would haul it to the people's houses for whom that was going to be their water for the next week or month or whatever, and charge them a few bucks. And that's what he did. And so I could see even then that there are residents in our community that need and deserve the help of those of us who have both the privilege of the types of jobs we have, but also we have the added responsibility and burden of being public servants and getting these fantastic jobs that we have, where I've been able to travel around the world, but we owe them the best we can possibly do. So that's a big driver for me, is I know, not through personal experience, I'm not pretending that that's the case, but I'm very, very keenly aware of how residents in our community struggle economically. And that can lead to the substance abuse and the mental health and all the other problems that we have. That's what I said earlier. This notion of a great career is the best solution. If we can get someone to that point or keep them at that point, we solve so many other problems. We can help them and their future generation. That's that cycle breaking activity of breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty. Getting people there, we got to do it intentionally, at scale, systematically, programmatically. That's what we set out to do. And that's why I love having the two departments together, because I get to deal with this population for whom those careers will be that cycle-breaking event in their life. And we get to know where those careers are, because we're working with companies directly to help them fill those hard-to-fill positions for those careers. So we just need to weave it all together and mix it all up and then put it in the oven, and we'll have a wonderful cake.
I think that's really neat, though. Like, these values were just kind of instilled on you very, very young, from, your dad helping out.
And mom,
community
my
members.
dad and mom, they were both
So-
always very giving people. And, I mean, it's just, that's been my blessing.
I like that, just being very aware of what you have and, what other people don't.
Yeah.
How can I help, instead of just,
Right.
that's their problem.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And I do see that in the circles in which I run with the full range, right? From literally the homeless. I mean, during the last freeze, one of my other directors and I are out in the bus at 2 a.m. handing out blankets. That's not to say anything about me. It's just to say that in my role, I'm there to serve the whole stack, up to the billionaires in our community that I have on my phone that I could call if I needed to. But that's not the way I view things. I view things as human beings who I'm here to serve and want to give them what they need to be successful, and to give them the best that I can, regardless of which end of the spectrum they're on. So yeah, I mean, that's what drives me to try to do better every day with our department. And I'm, can't forget to mention that we're really only able to do this because we have the amazing support of our county manager and the commissioner's court. They're bought in to most of these strategies and philosophies. We have some new court members, so we still have a lot of education to do. But the approach that we've been using over the last 15, 18, 20 years or so that's one of the benefits of the county. I love the county. You get an elected official in, they're there for 4 years. If they win one more time, that's 8 years. You can do a lot in 8 years. Now, to be on city council for 8 years, you have to win every 2 years, and you're constantly running. And it's not to knock them, but it's just to say that at the county, we have the privilege of being able to set up a farther horizon for ourselves on our strategies, and know that I can work with these elected officials to make the adjustments. And because we're not that smart, we have to learn by the experience of what we have and adjust and adapt as we go along. If they win one more time, that's 12 years. So, Judge Wolf is here for 22, and Commissioner Lozando's here for 30 something. I don't know. Justin's been here for quite a while. Now, Calvert's been here well over 10 years, I think 12 years, something like that. I don't know, but a long time. And I hope they stay longer. But we're able to then dig in with those same people and partner together as senior staff, as programs, as departments, with elected officials who have a long-term view. We still can react to rapid things like freezes and the need for blankets. But if we can keep our eyes focused on the strategic, then we can I think we have to make that difference. And I think that's a benefit of the county. I've lived through, I don't know how many mayors, many city council people, 4 or 5 directors of economic development at the city, all wonderful people, but just that turn, that natural perhaps turn is, we don't have that issue, have not historically had that issue. And I think that's a benefit of being a Bexar County employee.
Very well said.
Alrighty. What are your goals and visions for the future of economic and community development in Bexar County? And are there any upcoming initiatives or projects that you're excited about?
Wow, yeah. So my goals and vision is to continue to use our department as a laboratory for data-driven, evidence-based, programmatic interventions that are designed in such a way to identify clearly the problem, look for the root causes, deploy solutions, and then adjust and adapt until you solve the problem. So that is the approach we want to use whenever I'm tasked with doing something. So whether it's affordable housing or the recent conversations are starting to really arise around the homelessness issue, but not the typical one that people think about, which is Haven for Hope in downtown. Now we're looking at these homeless encampments that happen in suburban cities and in the unincorporated areas, which are not really well covered by all of this infrastructure and all of these programs that we have in place. So same thing. I had a pretty lengthy conversation the other day with 4 or 5 of my key staff. I had another meeting this morning around, let's dig in, let's be systematic. What are the real issues? What can we actually get done? Are we measuring the right things? What data do we have? And so that's really the vision, is to be thoughtful when we're tasked with doing, putting together a program or an initiative that's intended to help mitigate some problem, or in the case of economic development, leverage some opportunity and go after what we're after there. What's on the horizon? We started our economic development journey with this kind of Texas and northeastern Mexico strategy almost 13 years ago. And we haven't updated our strategy in about 10 years for a variety of reasons. So we'll be coming forward pretty soon with a consultant to help us refresh that regional strategy. It's what undergirds most of what we do, like what makes sense for us economically, which companies does that mean, what careers will that mean, and how do we plug it all in? So it's all tied together. That's on the kind of the nexus between economic development and our residents here. On the community development side, we can do much better. When the pandemic started, we were using a legacy software system that at the time didn't have a online application. So imagine, I mentioned already that we serve a lot of elderly or families with young children. The last thing I want to do during the those early days of COVID was have them come downtown to apply for utility assistance. Now, fortunately, CPS Energy and SAWS stopped their disconnects, but there were still concerns and people that were not necessarily facing disconnect that still wanted to be helped. But so we went out and acquired a software solution that did have an online application, and it's really has been very difficult to work with. It just is not working for our processes. So we need to go backwards and find a solution that is more attuned to the way we're dealing with it. When I get that, then the goal is to use it to gather data. The more data and insights I can gain into the populations that we're serving, the better we are able to determine whether what we're doing is working at all or as designed, and how we can make it better or change it or get rid of it if it's not working. So I think the future for us is to build more and more strength around using data to govern how we're running and managing and improving our programs. Without that, we're flying blind, and sometimes we have to fly blind. But I'd really rather not not do that just because we haven't pushed forward. So you can look for I think more of an emphasis around data gathering and analytics in my department.
Normally, like as far as collecting data, how does that work? Does that work from simply surveys in the community to just analyzing maybe how many applications we've gotten? Or
so this is what makes it difficult, is in order to really ascertain the effectiveness of an intervention, I really have to see the data on that individual. So for our workforce programs, as an example, right, I want to know everything I can about that person on the front end. How tall are they? Where are they from? What's their educational attainment level? Their age, their whatever it may be, right? And then we intervene with our training, and they get into a great career. Do they succeed? How long do they succeed? Do they, kind of longitudinally looking at that? Because if it works well, and then I can start to tweak, or, it's especially important when it doesn't work well, because then I can say, what did I do that I thought was going to work that I need to rethink or readjust? We haven't even talked about the programs that we have in the area of child abuse and neglect, but that's perhaps a better example. We intervene with families with the program that we have to try to prevent them from re-offending, re-neglecting, or re-abusing their child, right? So we're not involved with CPS, the Child Protective Services, but after that, we want to step in and try to help those families keep stable. And as we look at data there, we see, man, there's a lot of things that we should be worried about that we're not really worried about. Like these families get evicted. And I would think of eviction as being a kind of a destabilizing event, whether it's neglect or abuse. And so shouldn't I have some way of helping those families to be prioritized? So all of this is just where those low-hanging, really rich ideas are of integrating my rent support program with my child maltreatment, reduction program. And if I can overlay them together using data and then analyze it, then that should produce better results.
And we will be back after these messages. BiblioTech is bringing Once in a Wild to you. Once in a Wild is so much more than just a regular petting zoo. They are a traveling educational program that brings the zoo to you. So not only do you get to meet the amazing animal ambassadors up close, but you also get to learn all about them. Their mission is to inspire others to make a difference through live animal experiences, and it would all be for free. Go to our BiblioTech South Branch, where they will be hosting birds on July 8th, BiblioTech East will host reptiles on July 22nd, and BiblioTech West will host mammals on August 5th. All presentations will be held at 11 a.m., so call your branch to find out more. And now we're back.
Before we get to our last question, which is a simple question we like to ask all of our interviewees, I just want to again take the time to thank you for coming, making the time to just sit down and have a talk with us to share all of this wonderful information.
Very enlightening.
Very. I'm very excited for this episode to go out because I not only learned something new today, it just really changed my perspective, on the city that we live in and all the programs that are going into it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful city. We really do love it here.
Definitely much more of an appreciation for economic and community development after these interviews, especially learning more what you guys do and how y'all work as a team and everything that y'all just take into consideration. Yeah. It's admirable.
Yeah, thank you. It's every day's a challenge, but we just have an amazing team. They all lean into it. They're all bought into it, and we are lucky also to be in a department where we can typically see the fruits of our labor. We see somebody who's no longer struggling. We see somebody who has that great career. We had our graduation for our workforce program the other day, and they brought back 2 incumbents to speak, and they both moved on in their careers. Again, back to the idea they may have started at $15 or $17 an hour, but now they're moving up into leadership roles, et cetera. So we can see that, and that's obviously very rewarding, but it also is another proof point that what we're doing is working well. And now the question is how to scale it.
Wonderful. So like I mentioned, the last question we like to ask all of our interviewees, we are a library. So we love bringing all back to our resources. So what are you currently reading, watching, or listening to that you would like to share?
Yeah. Well, I'm a born-again Christian, so I'm actually reading a biography on Charles Spurgeon, who was a famous English pastor. Really, it kind of falls in line with everything we've been talking about. Charles Spurgeon was known in London as a really powerful preacher, but as important as all that was, he created orphanages and workforce programs and ladies' sewing groups. This is back in the 1800s. All sorts of social programs, because he understood that while we do need to meet the spiritual needs of the people who live in this area, we can't ignore their physical needs and their other things that they have. So education and careers and everything that we're involved in. And that's in fact, not how I stumbled across him, but as I've learned more about him, I can see that those are universal needs that populations like ours have, and that we've got to, try to work ourselves out of a job, even though we never will. So that's what I'm currently reading. Listening, I have very, very, very eclectic taste in music, and I am a guitar player. I think I mentioned before as well. But I like different kinds of jazz, and I like Latin music. My wife and I went and took a weekend trip during the Memorial Day holiday, and we listened to everything from Selena, Tito Puente to old classic country music. Robert Earl Keen, and just it's just as we're driving, I'm just going through the Spotify and finding something interesting to listen to. So it's pretty wide ranging. Yeah. Maria Callas, fantastic opera singer. So you name it, it's probably in the somewhere going to be played along a road trip like that.
Awesome.
Keeps things fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Well, again, thank you so much, David. This was great having you on, like
Thanks,
Ruby said
Roxanne.
earlier.
Appreciate it, yeah.
By all means, if you ever want to come back and talk with us again, another interview, even a book
Absolutely.
talk, by all means, you're more than welcome to come by anytime.
I will definitely do that. We should talk about literacy sometime.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big
Ooh, that
soapbox
would be a
issue
good
for
one.
me. Yeah, I have worked with quite a few different agencies that focus in that area. It's one of the real drivers for whether our economy will grow or not. And at the fundamental level, when we fail kids by not teaching them to read, then we pay the consequences for the rest of their lives and ours. So I'm a huge advocate for doing better in that area. And of course, using the same approach, we can find ideas to do better in that space as well. But that's for another podcast.
We'll save the date.
Yeah, I'm very interested. Well, once again, thank you for coming on. If you had any last words you wanted to say, feel free.
I appreciate it, y'all, very much. Thank you, Roxanne. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us here. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
And again, we'll talk to y'all next time. And once again, just to reiterate, this was David Marquez, Economic Director of Economic and Community Development. All right. Thanks again, y'all.